Here are some fascinating facts and historical context surrounding North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. 1. Inspired by industrial England. Gaskell's novel was heavily influenced by her experiences in Manchester, where she lived with her husband, a Unitarian minister. The city, a hub of the Industrial Revolution, exposed her to the harsh realities of factory life, which she vividly portrays in the fictional Milton. 2. Originally published as a serial. North and South was first serialized in Household Words, a magazine edited by Charles Dickens, between September 1854 and January 1855. Gaskell had frequent disagreements with Dickens over the editing, as he often shortened her installments to fit space constraints. 3. A social novel addressing class conflict. The book explores the stark contrasts between the agrarian south of England and the industrial north. It delves into themes of class struggles, worker strikes, and the evolving economic landscape of the Victorian era. Gaskell sought to humanize both factory owners and workers, advocating for mutual understanding. 4. Based on real labor struggles. The workers' strike in North and South was inspired by actual labor disputes of the 19th century, including the Preston strike of 1853 to 1854. These industrial actions reflected workers' demands for better wages and working conditions in textile mills. 5. Feminist undertones. Margaret Hale, the novel's protagonist, is an independent and strong-willed woman who challenges Victorian gender norms. She actively engages in social issues, defends her own opinions, and even reverses traditional gender roles by offering financial help to John Thornton in the end. 6. Comparison to Pride and Prejudice. The romantic tension between Margaret and Thornton is often compared to Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice. Both feature misunderstandings, class differences, and a slow-burning love story, though North and South places greater emphasis on social and economic issues. 7. Gaskell's portrayal of religion. The novel subtly reflects Gaskell's Unitarian beliefs, which emphasize social justice, equality, and compassion. Mr. Hale's moral crisis and departure from the Church of England highlight contemporary debates about faith and conscience. 8. Originally had a different title. Gaskell originally planned to title the book Margaret Hale, emphasizing the protagonist's journey. However, North and South was chosen to better reflect the novel's central theme of regional and class contrasts. 9. A novel of reconciliation. Unlike many other industrial novels of the time, North and South does not present a clear winner between factory owners and workers. Instead, it promotes understanding and compromise, as seen in Thornton's eventual adoption of fairer labor practices. 10. Popularity in modern adaptations. Though less well known in Gaskell's time, North and South has gained modern recognition, partly due to the 2004 BBC miniseries starring Richard Armitage and Daniela Denbiash. The adaptation brought new audiences to Gaskell's work and redefined Thornton as a brooding romantic hero akin to Mr. Darcy. 11. Influence of the Chartist movement. The novel reflects the influence of the Chartist movement, a working-class political movement in the 1830s and 1840s that demanded voting rights and better working conditions. The workers' strike in North and South echoes Chartist concerns, highlighting the growing tensions between the working class and industrialists. 12. A novel with a social purpose. Gaskell wrote North and South not just as a romance but as a social problem novel, a genre that aimed to expose contemporary societal issues. She wanted readers, especially middle and upper-class women, to understand the struggles of the working class and the need for social reform. 13. Inspired by Gaskell's personal loss. Gaskell had a deep personal connection to the hardships she depicted. Before writing the novel, she lost her only son, William, to scarlet fever. To cope with her grief, she threw herself into writing, using her experiences to shape the novel's themes of loss, resilience, and human connection. 14. Margaret as a strong Victorian heroine. Margaret Hale defies the passive female stereotypes of Victorian literature. Unlike many heroines of her time, she is not primarily defined by romance but by her intellect, moral convictions, and independence. She actively challenges John Thornton's views and plays a key role in resolving class tensions. 15. The evolution of John Thornton's character. While Thornton starts as a stern and pragmatic mill owner, his character undergoes significant growth. Unlike many Victorian industrialists, he learns to listen to workers and ultimately adopts fairer business practices, making him a progressive figure for his time. 16. Influence of industrial novels like Shirley and Hard Times. Gaskell's novel shares themes with Charlotte Bronte's Shirley, 1849, and Charles Dickens' Hard Times, 1854, both of which explore industrial unrest. However, unlike Dickens' highly satirical take, Gaskell presents a more balanced and humanized view of both workers and employers. 17. Victorian train travel and changing landscapes. The railway plays a symbolic role in North and South, linking rural and industrial England. Margaret frequently travels between the South, the North, and London, reflecting the increasing mobility of Victorian society due to the rapid expansion of rail networks. 18. Death as a recurring theme. The novel includes multiple deaths: Bessie Higgins, Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale, and Mr. Bell, emphasizing the fragility of life in Victorian England. These deaths serve as turning points for Margaret, forcing her to mature and take charge of her own future. 19. A story of economic change and adaptation. Gaskell portrays the rise and fall of industrial fortunes. Thornton's financial struggles, mill closure, and later adaptation to worker-friendly business models reflect the broader shifts happening in Victorian industry, where rigid capitalism was beginning to give way to more ethical labor practices. 20. Gaskell's complex view on class. Rather than glorifying or demonizing any one social class, Gaskell explores the complexities of both the upper and working classes. Margaret initially looks down on the North's industrial culture, but she eventually comes to respect its resilience and progressiveness, just as Thornton learns to value his workers beyond mere profit. 21. The role of London as a symbol of social mobility. London serves as a place of transition and transformation for Margaret. By the end of the novel, she inherits wealth and gains agency over her own future, symbolizing a break from traditional class limitations. Unlike her initial disdain for industrial wealth, she now uses it to build bridges rather than barriers. 22. Gaskell's literary legacy and later recognition. Though Gaskell was overshadowed by contemporaries like Dickens and the Brontes, her reputation has grown over time. North and South is now seen as one of the most insightful and ahead of its time novels on gender, labor, and industrialization. 23. A response to Dickens' Hard Times. Gaskell's North and South was published shortly after Charles Dickens' Hard Times, 1854, which also explored industrial England. However, while Dickens' novel was more pessimistic and satirical about factory life, Gaskell took a more nuanced and humanistic approach, showing both the hardships of workers and the challenges faced by mill owners. 24. Influence of Romanticism and Realism. The novel blends elements of Romanticism and realism. The early descriptions of Housetown reflect a romanticized, pastoral ideal, while the later chapters in Milton are steeped in the gritty realism of industrial life. This contrast underscores Margaret's emotional and intellectual journey. 25. The role of servants in Victorian society. Margaret's relationship with Dixon, her family's loyal servant, highlights the Victorian class system. Dixon is fiercely devoted to Mrs. Hale but holds prejudices against Milton's working class, reflecting the complexities of servitude and social hierarchy at the time. 26. John Thornton's character was inspired by a real industrialist. Thornton's character was likely influenced by Gaskell's own observations of Manchester's factory owners, particularly Samuel Gregg, a progressive mill owner who experimented with fairer labor conditions. Unlike many Victorian tycoons, Gregg supported workers' rights, much like Thornton does by the novel's end. 27. The industrial North versus the agrarian South. Gaskell contrasts the North and South of England to highlight cultural, economic, and social divides. The South, represented by Helstone, is depicted as traditional and genteel, while the North, represented by Milton, is modern, industrial, and pragmatic. The novel ultimately suggests that both regions have virtues and flaws, advocating for mutual understanding. 28. Margaret Hale as an unconventional heroine. Margaret defies Victorian expectations for women by displaying intellectual independence, moral courage, and social activism. Unlike many literary heroines of the time, she is not passive in love or life but actively shapes her destiny. 29. Gaskell's use of dialect for realism. Gaskell incorporated Lancashire dialect to authentically depict working-class speech. This added realism but also posed a challenge to middle-class readers unfamiliar with regional accents. The character of Nicholas Higgins, for instance, speaks in broad dialect, emphasizing his working-class identity. 30. The impact of the Irish famine on the novel. The Irish famine, 1845 to 1852, had a profound effect on the British economy, contributing to unemployment and poverty in industrial cities like Manchester, Milton in the novel. Many Irish immigrants sought work in English factories, increasing labor tensions, which are reflected in the strike and economic hardships depicted in North and South. 31. The novel's exploration of marriage and power dynamics. Unlike typical Victorian romances, North and South reverses traditional gender roles. Margaret rejects Thornton's first proposal because she wants to be seen as an equal, not as a woman in need of protection. By the novel's end, when she offers financial support to Thornton, she challenges 19th-century notions of male economic dominance. 32. The influence of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Aurora Leigh. Gaskell was influenced by Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Aurora Leigh, 1856, a novel in verse that also portrays a strong, independent heroine. Like Aurora Leigh, North and South addresses women's roles, social justice, and the contrast between rural and urban life. 33. The novel's Christian themes. Gaskell, a Unitarian, infused North and South with Christian themes of compassion, moral responsibility, and reconciliation. Mr. Hale's spiritual crisis and Nicholas Higgins' views on religion highlight the era's theological debates. 34. The representation of death and mourning. Victorian society had elaborate mourning customs, and Gaskell's novel reflects these through the deaths of Mrs. Hale, Bessie Higgins, Mr. Hale, and Mr. Bell. Their passings serve as turning points for Margaret's emotional and personal growth, reflecting the novel's meditations on grief, resilience, and transformation. 35. The role of female friendship. Margaret's friendships with Bessie Higgins and Edith Shaw contrast sharply. Edith represents the idle, pampered upper-class woman, while Bessie embodies the working-class struggle and moral depth. These friendships highlight the different roles and expectations of Victorian women across class lines. 36. The novel's economic realism. Unlike many romantic novels of the time, North and South deals with economic hardship, business failure, and financial survival. Thornton's mill closure is a rare depiction of a self-made man experiencing capitalist failure in Victorian literature, making his character arc more realistic and compelling. 37. The ending was rushed due to serialization. Because North and South was serialized in household words, Gaskell had to conclude the story quickly. The final romantic reconciliation between Margaret and Thornton is notably short and understated, leaving some readers wanting more closure. 38. The novel's understated humor. Though known for its serious themes, North and South has moments of sharp wit and social satire. Margaret's interactions with the self-absorbed Henry Lennox and the pompous Aunt Shaw provide subtle comedic relief. 39. A critique of Victorian snobbery. Margaret initially looks down on industrial Milton, but she gradually overcomes her prejudices, realizing that the North is not merely grim and unrefined but also full of energy, resilience, and opportunity. This mirrors Gaskell's own transformation after moving to Manchester. 40. The novel's legacy in modern adaptations. The 2004 BBC adaptation of North and South, starring Richard Armitage and Daniela Denbiash, renewed interest in Gaskell's work. The train station scene at the end, which was added for the adaptation, became iconic and mirrors the emotional weight of pride and prejudice in popular culture. Thanks for listening and watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Like this video, It helps more people find these classic stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think.